everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. You know, I've made a lot of videos in the past about guns I own that I think are the best. Well, today we're going to switch that up a little bit, and we're going to talk about the worst gun that I own. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the worst that I own. Maybe the worst that I've ever owned. So over the course of my life, obviously there's been some pretty bad stuff. You know, for different reasons, it ends up at the bottom of my list. It's big, it's bulky, it's chunky, it's unreliable, it's inaccurate, it's got a bad trigger, whatever the case is, usually ends up at the bottom of the list. This one right here is at the very bottom of the list for a different reason, and that is because it is dangerous. As a matter of fact, this thing almost took out my eye. If I had not have been wearing eye protection, pretty sure I would have lost my vision in my left eye because it left a massive divot in the sunglasses that I was wearing. So what we're going to be talking about today is this 8-inch 9mm Just Right carbine. Okay, so let me go ahead and talk to you guys about the JRC, or the Just Right carbine, and explain to you why it is the worst that I own, maybe the worst that I've ever owned, and that's not just due to the critical malfunction. That was because of poor quality control. There's a lot of things on here that I absolutely do not like, but obviously the critical malfunction was the one that really kind of sent it over the top. So this was actually sent to me by the company. Now, when you get something as a YouTuber and somebody sends you something to review, you always have to keep it in the back of your mind that it's possible it was cherry-picked, meaning it got off the shelf, they took an extra look at it, a little extra quality control before they sent it out to somebody who they know is going to put it on camera. And so again, you have to keep that in the back of your mind that yours might have an extra quality control step versus somebody, you know, who just gets one outside of YouTube. So I kept that in my mind, but that didn't really need to be there for very long because the moment I opened up the box, I saw a problem. I noticed that the handguard was just slightly off, which wouldn't really be that big of a deal if this just had a standard handguard and I could tighten it down with some Allen keys and your handguard's good. This handguard is actually integrated to the barrel nut. So the handguard is the barrel nut. So if your handguard is loose, the barrel nut is loose. So I went ahead and I picked it up, and sure enough, the handguard spun free. I mean, it had zero resistance whatsoever. Now that could be a pretty big problem. The reason is because if the handguard is the barrel nut, that means this barrel can move free. That means the barrel can move free. You could have head spacing problems, all sorts of reliability issues, and safety concerns. So I figured, okay, that's kind of a big one, but I'll go ahead and I'll tighten this thing down and see if we can fix it. Maybe that's just one quality control issue that I'll want to mention. So I decided to take it out. Now, I didn't notice anything, you know, other than some, you know, physical problems that we'll talk about here in just a second. I didn't notice anything else mechanical on this that could really cause any issues, but that's what happened. Took it out, didn't even have the cameras or anything really set up yet. I had a cell phone that I had running just for, you know, my own personal use, which I uploaded to Instagram, and I'll have to see if it's still there. But I did get a little bit of footage of it, even though it's really hard to see. So anyway, I think I'm like 6 or 7 rounds into it, and bang, this thing just blows. I mean, obviously you could see it's still intact, but it was just a loud like explosion, and little shards of brass were just going everywhere. And one of them came back and hit me right in my safety glasses that I was wearing, right in the middle, right where my eye was, and took a pretty good gouge out of those Oakley safety glasses. And Oakley makes pretty good lenses. They're pretty strong, so to actually take a scratch or a gouge out of it is kind of difficult. It takes a little bit of effort. So obviously I was kind of taken back by that. I looked down and I couldn't really figure what happened other than the fact that the case head was still attached to the bolt carrier group and that there was pieces of brass everywhere. So I decided to take it over to my FFL. They took a look at it and he knew exactly what the problem was right away. So the handguard was on there tight. We didn't have an issue with that. It was not as tight as when I originally tightened it, but the problem was there is a feed ramp in here. This feed ramp is not integrated to the barrel. It's not integrated into the lower receiver. It's actually something that's kind of sitting in there like this, almost like on a hinge. And this thing had become so loose that the feed ramp was actually kind of moving. I mean, I could stick my finger up there right now. I don't know if you guys can hear this. That's a feed ramp making that noise. Okay, so the feed ramp moves, and it also moves back and forward. So what happened was the round was introduced somewhat into the chamber, but not all the way. When a round doesn't go all the way in the chamber, usually it doesn't allow the firing pin or the trigger mechanism to hit the firing pin to make it go off. This one, for some reason, even though the brass was probably sticking out about halfway, that's just what we determined based off of what happened, Even though the brass is sticking out about halfway, that trigger was still able to hit that firing pin, and that thing went off with nothing in the chamber. It was basically just sitting right here. So it was sitting right here, and boom, it went off and sent shards of everything everywhere, hit my truck bed, and that's what came back and hit me. So that ramp right there, the feed ramp, which is supposed to help guide everything in, actually got hung up after we just kind of tested it out by putting some dummy rounds in there to see where it get hung up. It got hung up right on the shelf where the bullet sits into the casing. So it got hung up right there. Everything was out of battery, and we had a big out of battery blowout, and that was a huge problem. So after we let them take a look at it and everything else, went to go put it back in the box, and sure enough, the handguard starts spinning again. So even though I tightened this thing down really, really tight, the handguard came free once again. So I had the problem with the feed ramp, a problem with the barrel nut. I mean, all sorts of issues that are not just quality control. I mean, they're straight up safety. These are safety issues. Again, if I wasn't wearing those glasses, I could have lost an eye with this thing. Now, I did contact the company. I let them know what happened. I let them know what's going on. I let them know that we, took some extra time to investigate the problem, and they said go ahead and send it back so we could do our own investigation and see if they can get to the bottom of exactly why what happened. And I went home. I put it in the safe until it was time to send it out, and I forgot about it. And I haven't heard from them at all, and I forgot that it was in there. So after finding it recently, I thought, you know what? No, I still got to do a video about this because I think it's really important. I think it's important for people, especially if you're somebody who's out there. Maybe this is something in the size that somebody younger would use, and that is a really, really bad quality control issue. Again, the fact that we had that out of battery explosion, the fact that the barrel nut and the handguard were completely loose, it's something that people need to know. I'm not trying to slam the company at all. I'm sure there's plenty out there that work just perfectly fine. So I'm not trying to slam them, but their quality control should have been better. They should have known that this was not torqued to spec, and that there was other things in here that were having problems. These are things that need to be checked before they're sent out. So even though, again, I'm not slamming the company because sometimes, there's just like those one-offs or maybe, something's bad, but that shouldn't happen, especially in things like this that can be dangerous. Now, on top of the critical malfunction that I had, the other thing I don't like is just the handguard. This handguard, number one, it's huge. I mean, this thing is monstrous. It's so much bigger than the receiver itself that it kind of looks a little bit crazy, and I think that's because it's also the barrel nut. But they also did a really terrible job of making this thing smooth. It feels like a cheese grater when you hold it. It feels like a cheese grater, does not feel comfortable. I mean, even if your hand is still, but you're kind of moving around and stuff, you will still feel some of those edges be fairly sharp. It's just not something that's good to hold. They deburred it. They got rid of any, little spikes or pokey things that might still have been sticking out from the manufacturing process. But other than that, they left some pretty sharp edges here. And it just, I don't think it's a good design. I really don't think it's a good design. And I just think that the quality control is bad, the design is bad, and I absolutely hate this thing. I do not like it whatsoever. So again, this is the 8-inch JRC. It's probably a little bit of an older model because things change every year. Now we're in 2022. I think this was like late 21, so maybe a little bit more than a year ago, something like that, or I'm sorry, late 2020. So a little bit more than a year ago, maybe a year and 4 months. It's been some time, so I don't even know if they have this one anymore. But if you maybe have one, I think it's important for you guys to know. I mean, something like this, you can give it to a younger person, and that younger person could end up getting injured. And so you need to double check that, is my handguard tight? Is that thing flopping around in there and possibly going to cause an issue? You need to do your own due diligence and check to make sure that these things are good to go, because while it's rare, and I'm again not trying to slam them whatsoever as a company, because sometimes things just happen, but when it comes to safety, there should be a zero tolerance. You shouldn't allow anything to go out that isn't ready to go in terms of safety. If somebody sends something that's like a rubber boat, or a floaty for your pool, big deal. If there's a problem, you just get another one. But something like this, when you're dealing with stuff like this, it has to be safe when it goes out the door, or that is just completely unacceptable. So again, I wanted to make you guys aware of that. If you own one, if you're thinking about it, just keep this story in mind. So again, the JRC 8-inch, worst one I got. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.